Truth be told, we have been in this studio sitting at this desk for, 10 minutes maybe, something like that? Mm-hmm. And I'm already like, I wish we'd had the cameras rolling because, right, we were already talking about some good stuff. So I don't know if we could rewind and start talking about it again, but you are Nate Larkin, and you're head of Samson Society and wrote a book about Samson and the Pirate Monks, all kinds of great stuff, and influencing a lot of people's lives with stuff that we're struggling with. And the core of it, if I'm correct, is sort of some sexual pain and wounds and healing of that. But it really goes beyond that, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Because
that was one of the big revelations to me when I first entered recovery for sex addiction, porn addiction 26 years ago.
Yeah, because you've been sober now 25 years, I heard recently. Is that right? 26?
Yeah.
26. I guess the podcast I heard might have been a year ago. Maybe now you're 26. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, it took me a couple of years to find sobriety.
Okay.
I've resisted I had so much religious and intellectual arrogance that it took me a while to get humble enough, right, to find some freedom.
How does I know you were going to talk about something else, so I'm going to switch gears here. How does that affect your sobriety? How does being religious or that kind of stuff?
Well, I think we do have to be religious. We have to be spiritual. Recovery is a spiritual thing, right? It's spiritual growth. Right?
But you're talking about like dead religion or legalistic religion.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that kept you from.
Oh, sure.
How?
Well, I had a lot of. First of all, I'd been reading the Bible through a filter that had been handed to me, one that really filtered out grace to a large degree. Yeah. We were very much in a holiness stream. So while we sang Amazing Grace and we talked about grace, when it came right down to it, grace was in short supply, right? You had all the grace you needed until you needed it.
Yeah.
But I had been applying really my own principles of sin management for a very long time. Mm-hmm. I had my pat answers that weren't working, and I had a religious pedigree. By the time I walked into that first meeting in the basement of the church in the middle of the week while all the good people were gone, I had a master's of divinity from a respected seminary. I'd been a pastor. I told myself that I was there as a missionary because, as these people talked about their higher power, I knew who my higher power was, and I knew my higher power could beat up their higher power, and that meant. And that meant that they didn't have anything to teach me. Mm-hmm. They didn't have anything to tell me.
Yeah.
And I really also was there. I had no intention of joining a group. I was there for research purposes. Mm. My goal was to set the land speed record for recovery. Okay. So I'm a fairly sharp guy. And so my plan was to do what I've always done. Go in, master the material quickly, pass the exam, get the certification, and get out the door and forget that this sad chapter had ever happened. But I now understand that recovery requires relationship, that the opposite of addiction is connection to God, to others, and to ourselves. But I was so deep in shame and hiding so far into the shadows. Sending versions of myself out into the sunlight from time to time that, false selves can't get sober.
Yeah.
Only authentic selves can. Yeah. And until I was willing to bring my authentic self, my needy, broken, confused, wounded, hurting, rebellious self into the light, I was just going through the motions.
Yeah. I imagine it's tough, and I think it was for me too, in a very similar religious upbringing, that you don't want to double down on, like, you're kind of feeling already you're unworthy, you're unloved, you're not doing enough, you're not working. And then you're doubling down on, now on top of that, I'm going to say and admit I'm helpless and hopeless and I'm a sinner and I'm screwing up my life and my marriage and my family. It almost seems like it's just adding fuel to the fire, rather than it being the alternative. That's you're actually becoming real and like the word used, authentic. I think that's That's better. And that's so 26 years. And just so one of the good things we were talking about before we started here was, if you don't mind me asking, like you're actually going for some more.
Oh, absolutely.
Some more, another touch from God and from people. Yeah.
I'm hooked on healing, brother.
Amen.
I really am.
That's awesome.
And one of the things that I have really come to recognize is that my emotional palate is still pretty limited. And Jesus came to give us life and life more abundantly, right? So I have a pretty narrow spectrum, emotional spectrum, because in the home I was raised in, feelings didn't count, right? It was what you did and what you believed, not
Keep
what you
your feelings to yourself.
You're right,
and
exactly.
even did you get the same thing that I got? As don't trust your feelings.
Oh,
or
absolutely.
Feelings don't live by faith, not by feelings.
Right, exactly.
I'm probably with you in learning how majestic my feelings are.
Yeah.
How vibrant and important they are to me too. And I'm starting to feel my feelings, as they say. And it's like you breathe and you feel things that So
life takes on new dimensions.
Yeah.
Now the most challenging of the feelings for me is grief. So, I mean, I did not cry at my mother's funeral when I was 9 years old, and I have not cried since.
You have not?
No.
Even to this day?
Now, I feel sadness.
Yeah.
I get the most emotional when I'm in front of a crowd. I don't know what that's about, Gary. I really don't.
Wow.
It's not a put on.
But it's not you tied grief with standing in front of people. It's not grief. You're not feeling grief when you're
no. But when I'm telling the story.
Oh, okay, yeah. You're feeling the pain of it again.
I can feel a little bit of it.
Wow.
Okay, but that was my mother's death was a very traumatic thing. First of all, she was mentally ill, and in the mid '60s, mental illness carried a ton of stigma in the culture at large. And in the church.
Right.
So depression could be a sign of lack of faith. And the circles I was raised in, that puts your salvation in question.
Yeah.
And then she died. She took her own life. So in our world back then, suicide is murder. Murderers go to hell.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So nobody was going to tell me that at 9 years old.
Right.
They didn't give me any information about her illness when she was away for a year.
You didn't know
No. And then when she died, they didn't tell me how she died. They gave me a fairy tale that I knew was fishy. Right? And the next Sunday in Sunday school, we were singing, "I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart."
But you
rejoice in the Lord always.
Yeah.
I never saw my dad cry. I knew my dad was grieving. He was a hurting puppy.
Yeah.
But he didn't cry. I never saw him cry. We didn't talk about her. We took her pictures down. Joy is kind of at the opposite end of the emotional spectrum from grief. And when our ability to feel grief is truncated, that affects our ability to feel joy.
Yeah. You shut one down, the other goes with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want more life, Gary, which is why I'm going for more therapy.
Good. Wow. When you said that, I was thrilled. And if you don't mind me saying, the Dan Allender kind of school of thought, I think is phenomenal. I think it's just stuff. But it is, we may be better in the church world at helping people with, with whether it be mental illness or certain struggles that they're facing, maybe better, but we're not there yet by any means. I mean, there's still, and it's not so much the stigma, I think, as it is the American Western John Wayne culture of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. A friend of mine that you know quite well, I was telling him about some of the work I'm doing with some people, kind of helping them through some of the early childhood trauma that they faced. And his response was, they just need to grow up hair.
Oh,
He was halfway teasing and stuff.
Yeah.
And then another pastor I was with recently, we were doing a conference together, and I was talking about it was a place where the people had been quite a bit hurt, and so I was talking about relationships we've had with our mother and father.
Yeah.
And afterwards he said, real flippantly, he said, "My father beat me almost every day, but I deserved it." And then he laughed.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about? It's that kind
absolutely,
of,
yeah.
It's like, just keep it buried.
Yeah.
It feels safer down there.
Yeah.
Rather than, so good on you, man, to keep pursuing. At our age, we're still pursuing, just this wholeness.
Yeah.
And what
yeah.
Christ has to offer that we haven't tapped into yet. There's so much that he's given to us that we're at this reservoir. We were talking earlier about the scripture, the well that never runs dry. It's an access when for me, I was telling you about it in the sense of, being an introvert. Sometimes I run out of gas when I'm with people, but the Lord's been speaking to me. It's like, okay, well, that you shouldn't have your own gas in the tank anyway. Just let me. I'm the well.
Yeah.
I'm the one who fills the gas tank, the emotional,
Yeah.
the relational gas tank, and that I think that can be for our healing too. That
Yes.
if we're trying to do it in ourselves or trying to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, we're not going to get too far. So we keep at it. And do you find the layers change, but they become actually more? So like you start off with, maybe you're a young married couple and you realize you're angry at your spouse a lot, and so you're dealing with anger, and
Right.
then you see, okay, the anger's gone, but now I see there's some addictions that I have in my life. Now those are gone. The peeling back, and it doesn't get more to the core.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what's bringing this to the surface for me is that, Allie and I just celebrated our 46th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations!
Yeah.
Exactly what Kelly and I are at 46.
46.
It's a good year.
And Allie is 10 years older than I am.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she's always giving me previews of coming attractions, health-wise, right?
Yeah.
And she's now starting to experience certainly some physical decline, a little bit of cognitive decline.
I'm sorry.
And, life involves a series of necessary losses, right?
Yeah.
And those losses need to be grieved if we're going to move through them.
Yeah.
It's becoming more and more clear to me as Allie and I age and as we look at the inevitability of loss.
Yeah.
I've got to learn to grieve better because I need that tool in the years that are ahead.
When you say that, I draw a blank in the sense of, like, if I was your pastor, and you came to me and said, I need to learn to grieve, I would go like, read your Bible more, just like, where do you go with that? Like, is there there's no school of grieving.
Well,
it's a master's in grieving. Oh,
actually, I'm following. I follow breadcrumbs is what I do when I see something going on. So some of our Samson guys have discovered a therapist. He's an Allender trained therapist with offices in North Carolina and Washington D.C. They've gone to intensives with this guy. He'll take 8 guys at a time for 4 days.
Wow.
Okay, and these guys said, this fella is so empathetic. He, they went in all buttoned up, and he kindly, compassionately, respectfully unzipped them. And they experienced a range of emotions they'd never been able to access before. Cried more than they'd ever cried in their lives. And there's one guy who I know quite well because he's been in Samson now for 8 or 9 years. We've traveled together. And I know that he, like me, would say, I've never cried, and I'm afraid that if I ever start, I'll never stop. And I'll tell you what, when he texted me from the last intensive with the news that, he'd had this breakthrough, I signed up immediately.
Yeah.
So it's Andrew Bauman is the therapist, and I'm going to see the guy.
Yeah. And you've already been there, or you signed up?
No, I'm signed up.
Okay.
I'll be there tomorrow.
Out of curiosity, your friend that never cried, did he cry it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So you might see your first tears in
I'm hoping.
in decades. Huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you don't.
Yeah,
have them,
I'm
'cause
envious of people who can cry.
I sometimes wish I could stop crying. I cry.
It's beautiful, Gary.
I cry at like romantic comedies are my favorite.
Yeah.
It's funny. My wife likes war movies, and I like romantic comedies. But no, I do. But no, I don't say that to say I have something you don't have.
Yeah, yeah.
I say that to say, just you have things that I don't have in awareness and in maturity. But I'm thankful for them. I trust that there'll be tears of both grief that'll come out, and,
Right.
and tears of joy usually follow. That's kind of what's good about it.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
And Allie's praying for me back in Tennessee, and she cautioned me not to get my expectations too high. Go and hope, but try not to script what has to happen in order for it to be a success.
Yeah, because you can go into a setting like that and get all anxious and fearful. Like, am I going to cry? Can I feel my feelings? Can I get more emotional? Can I express things that I haven't been able to express? And then you're kind of, use the word unzipped. You're more zipped up than you were maybe when you even started. And our minds are some. I had a guy pray for me 2 nights ago. It was so liberating. And I didn't ask him to pray for me, but I was just telling him, like, hey, I tried to pray this morning, and I felt like the old school popcorn machines. You put the kernels in, and all of a sudden the whole glass tank fills up. Yeah, it's just like this popcorn of ideas and thoughts and responsibilities and to-do lists and old memories. I mean, it was way too much for like happening all at once. And so when I do find anxiety or stress sometimes interferes with my prayer life, so I use this kind of an imaging type thing, like it's my iPhone, and an idea comes in, and I kind of swipe the picture off to the side, and see if that can. But this one was way too much. It was that, and so he just said, "Well, let me pray for you," and he just prayed this really sweet, like I would have probably blocked a little more because I'm a little bit of a theology nerd. So he didn't call it like demonic possession, like, oh, there's a demon in your brain. Yeah. But he just said, there's probably some attack from the enemy. And he prayed over me, and he just like asked me, he said, do you have anything from the Lord of what the attack is? And I just heard this word, the enemy's trying to limit me, like keep me from things like that. And so he prayed over me that the attacks would be gone. And he said, now what are you hearing? And the word just popped. It wasn't conscious. It was like from my soul, unlimited or limitless. Yeah. And man, that's just the last few days just stuck with me. And it's just like there's a new me. There's a new part of me that doesn't have that old weight of feeling like I can't do this. I'm not going to be good enough. Yeah. Just like in an instant like that. So, the pursuit of healing that you said you actively and unceasingly chase after, does things that are, supernatural and in really powerful ways. We go after healing. It's sad that some Christians don't. They get stuck. Where I was stuck, I don't know if you were at all, that if I'm going to get healed, it's going to be three things that we're messing with my deeper healing. One is that it's got to be up here. I have to understand it. I have to perceive it. It has to be cognitive and conscious. Yeah. And so the other one has to be like instantaneous. Like God, strike me with the Holy Spirit and let me speak in tongues and fall on the floor and get up healed. And the other one has to be alone. Right. I don't want to confess it to my brother. So those were my 3 roadblocks to that. And the Lord's been teaching me the joy of confession. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be even like, I sinned this thing, but just like what I just shared, that story I just shared with you was confession. It was something that can be good even, but having people in your life that you can tell your story to. And for me, it's been, I want you to comment on this because I think you probably have experienced it deeper than I have. Being that I lived up in my head, this thought came to mind, like if somebody came up behind you right now, Nate, and just like goosed you right there and said, boo, you would jump. You would go. The spontaneous thing is that we get bigger, to appear bigger and better than we are. Our heart rate increases. Our blood flow goes through us. We usually make a sound like warrior. Sure. Now, every single one of those things I just said, none of it is up here. You didn't think like I need to raise my heartbeat, right? And so I think the healing we're talking about is usually not like do not be anxious. You read it in the Bible. Yeah. Okay, I won't be anxious. It's usually like that kind of more gut thing. Yeah. Sure. Is that something that you guys at Samson you look at?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Yeah, I definitely tried to come headfirst into recovery. Tried to think, think the addiction, right? So I'm doing irrational things for non-rational reasons, trying to solve the problem by rational means.
Say that one more time.
I'm doing irrational things
Gotcha.
for non-rational reasons, trying to solve the problem by rational means.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Most of the decisions, the poor decisions that I have made, those decisions were made before I was consciously aware that I had made them. Part of that is due to habituation. I've come to believe that there are kind of 3 phases to recovery and growth. The first phase and the most crucial is repentance. Right? I've got to make a decision to surrender, to turn around, repent, right?
Yeah.
And now I open myself to healing. The second phase is healing. And sometimes that comes like a thunderbolt instantaneously. God is capable of doing that and does deliver people instantly from time to time. Most of the time, he's working a different agenda. Healing is a miraculous, progressive thing.
Yeah.
Right?
I'd say, I mean, I may be off here, but I'm going to guess 90% of the time it's a journey more than a
absolutely
instantaneous.
Or more, yeah.
More,
right.
95, 98%.
Yeah. So in the same way that a broken bone mends and a cut closes, it takes time for us to heal from our sin. Yeah. Addiction is a sickness caused by sin, right? So we've repented of the sin. Now the sickness has to be healed. But there's something else. When we encountered something that we could not process, a trauma in life, and we were overwhelmed, we couldn't handle it. We didn't have the help around us to handle it. Yeah. We found a way to cope. We found something to do. We found a workaround.
Right.
And because that workaround worked short term, seemed to work, we repeated it. Now, one thing we do know about the human brain is that it is, first of all, it consumes more energy than any other organ of the body. It's doing literally a million things at once. Most of them, we're consciously aware of very little of what the brain is doing at any given minute, right? And it is also programmed for efficiency. I had to consciously learn how to ride a bike, for example.
Right.
I had to pay close attention. This is actually to me, absolutely fascinating. We actually have 2 learning systems, an explicit learning system, and that we use words and concepts, right? Right. And an implicit learning system. Right. Our implicit learning system is what is functioning from even before we leave the womb. We are subconsciously taking in data and starting to try to get a sense of ourselves. Yeah, right. And then we get out into the world. We don't know a thing. Yeah. We have some giant people upon whom we are completely dependent for our survival. Yeah. Right. We can't even roll over. We can't feed ourselves. If they don't take care of us, we're toast. Right. This is survival. Yeah. So we have to please these giant beings, right?
Or we're in trouble.
That's right. Yeah. And they are our only source of information about ourselves and about the world. So they tell us by what they do and by what they don't do, what the world is like, how safe the world is, and we start to assemble the clues as to who we are. Now, I have no doubt that my father loved me. But knowing your parents loved you is not the same as feeling your parents loved you. Yeah. My dad took great pride in the fact that he gave me my first spanking when I was 8 days old.
Wow.
Okay. Because
I've never heard of that.
Because I wouldn't stop crying.
Ooh.
Now, he came from a world where good babies are babies that don't cry. And good children are children who don't speak, who don't interrupt, who don't ask for things, they speak when spoke. Okay, that's his whole deal. And he wanted to raise good kids. Now, at 8 days old, I have no language. I don't know why I was crying. I needed something. I wanted something. And all I could do was cry. But the message I got was, don't want, don't need. And that was the beginning of some implicit learning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You couldn't cognitively say to yourself, don't want, don't need, but you felt that's how I have to live.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's implicit.
Exactly.
Explicit is when you finally learn the definitions of those things.
Yeah.
Or your mind wraps around how that, like you telling that story to me was your explicit way of mechanism of looking back at that time. But what's deeper inside of you, that implicit memory, is with you in a deeper way.
Yes.
A more stubborn way, maybe even. It's not going to, as we're talking about healing, it's not going to change quite as quickly, right?
Right. But it becomes part of personality.
Identity.
So if I'm raised in a home where, for example, I learned that to be good, I don't have a lot of needs, don't express needs, don't ask for things.
Wow.
I was absolutely stunned when I married Allie. Allie was a single mom, so I became a dad at 22. And when Christmas rolled around, she asked David for his Christmas list. There was such a foreign concept to me.
Of wanting.
You were not allowed. You could want, just don't say it.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
I don't want to interrupt your flow, but did you ever have a time where you risked it and you asked him for something and you got rejected?
That's a good question.
Nothing explicitly comes to mind?
No, nothing leaps to mind.
Okay. But it wasn't an event. It was that long-term.
But I will tell you, when I got into recovery and I started therapy and talking with my sponsor, they started asking me the questions that were impossible for me to answer. What do you feel? I don't know what I feel.
Wow.
What do you want? I don't know. What do you need? Can't answer that question.
That's sad. Man, that's a rough way to live.
Sure. But I can be a pretty winsome personality. I'm a lousy salesman because I can't close. Right?
Okay.
Right?
Because you have to ask.
You have to ask.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I've been recruited a couple times for sales jobs because I have a winsome personality, and people say, "There's a born salesman."
Yeah.
Right?
Wow. Yeah.
But I can't close.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
Wow.
But what happens is this thing that we find. Let's take the example of a bicycle, learning to ride a bike. I heard somebody ask the question on a science show, why don't bikes fall down? What keeps bikes upright? And the most common answer, people think, well, it's momentum. Right?
That's what my mind went there.
Sure, absolutely. And that's definitely a part of it. But it's also the rider. If you just push – I used to push a bike down a hill to see – I mean, kids do that, right? Yeah. It would go for a little bit.
Has momentum.
Right.
Yeah, gotcha.
But the rider has to make subtle connections with the handlebars and the way he or she leans to keep the thing upright.
Yeah.
So the rider is key to keeping the bike upright. Now, the reason the rider can do that is because he has a sense, a seventh sense, the sense of balance. Okay? Now, the primary organ for the sense of balance is in the inner ear. We know that, this nautilus-shaped thing full of viscous liquids with fine filaments in there. Those are neurons that are wired directly to the deepest part of the brain. Instantaneous communication.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, before we learned to ride a bike, we had to learn to walk. That took a long time.
Yeah.
And we were going to fall down a lot for the next few months. Because what the brain is doing in balance is two things. It's monitoring where we are in space, but it is also predicting what's going to happen in the next split second, where we're going to be next. It's always thinking ahead just a little bit,
Right.
so that we will compensate and won't fall down. Okay?
Gotcha.
All right. So what the brain does is it builds a database of failures and successes. And so the algorithm, the accuracy of the algorithm is dependent upon the quality of the data and the quantity of the data.
Right.
Right? So in the beginning, the first time we stood up, we'd never stood up before. That was the first piece of data in the data bank, and we fell down. That was recorded. But we had stood up, and that was recorded as well. Okay? So the next time we could stand up a little more. Okay. You get the idea. It takes failure to for the implicit part of the brain. Now to what happens eventually is that database is so good that our brain can always, unless something really unexpected happens, somebody sticks a foot out in front of us, or we hit a root we didn't see, okay?
Yeah.
We don't have to think a lick about walking.
Right.
Right? It takes about 100,000 messages from the brain to motivate us down the street, but it's being done without our conscious awareness.
Right.
And that is all now programmed, automated, habituated.
Yeah.
We don't have to think about it anymore. But changing a walk, you got to think about it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Now you get on a bike. I remember the first time you get on a bike, it doesn't look hard, but there's a problem. Because now, for the very first time, there's a hinge between you and the ground. The implicit part of your brain knows that when you start to tip over, you have to lean. But it doesn't recognize it yet that there's a hinge there, so you lean the wrong way and you fall down. Okay?
Gotcha.
It takes a while for the brain to get some more data. And until it does, you're going to lean the wrong direction.
Yeah.
You're not going to be a good bike rider. It takes time for the new habit to build. There'll be failure in the process.
Yeah.
But eventually you get to the point where you can ride a bike. You don't have to think about it. You can switch all the time. So to me, that's a good description of recovery. Those early days, I got a text today from a guy who sent it at 4 a.m. He says, "I really want to use. It's first thing in the morning. I've always used now. I'm feeling overwhelmed about it." I know. I remember what that was like.
Yeah.
Because mornings were automated. Emotionally, they were automated.
And habit too.
Oh, and habit too. Yeah.
Right.
So habits can be emotional.
Yeah.
And habits of thought and habits of action. And I needed the help of a sponsor, and I needed some time, and then and surrendering to the Lord, and a lot of help. It really helps in the early stages when you're learning to ride a bike. It really helps to have training wheels. Okay, So good boundaries, a lot of support in early recovery, because you're going to be leaning the wrong way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Until you finally figure it out.
Yeah.
I remember how rough those early mornings were in the early months of recovery. But I know this brother is doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Rather than fighting it himself, he sent a text to a bunch of guys.
Wow. That's incredible, the power in that. That you wouldn't think, it doesn't really compute. Like, okay, I'm going to send a text to 6 or 8 guys or whatever.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm going to have more ability to break bad habits and stuff like that. I'm sure there's a whole philosophy, psychology, or science to what it is about opening yourself up to others. But man, you're some pretty incredible stuff you're just sharing. Yeah. And I've been looking at that too, how the brain works, and I guess I had a slightly different slant on recovery than that. I'm 100% agreeing with that. But the way I had looked in the past is, so I had learned to the things that became implicit to me. So if I saw a pornographic picture of a woman when I was 25 years old, I wouldn't think about like, Lord, should I do that? Should I not? It was just like, the green light already went.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The rocket already fired.
Right.
It was, and that was implicit.
Right.
And so I learned that behavior. So for me, it was almost like, okay, that's the bike I know how to ride.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to. And this group of scientists did a study. I don't know if you heard of this or not. They rigged a bicycle to be opposites.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you had to turn.
Mm-hmm.
Normally you turn left, but when you would turn left, you would go right.
Yeah.
And it took them these 140 IQ guys from MIT or wherever they're from.
Yeah.
It took them months to learn.
Yeah.
And then if they didn't do it for a couple of days, they would go back out.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's almost like the struggle of the journey. Why it's usually not instantaneous is because you've been riding your bike this way for so long. Now
we learned to live in sinful ways.
Yeah. Then those become habits.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that healing or recovery is learning to ride your life the wrong way. It might be more like, I think the opposite probably be true. We actually grew up riding, turning left when we would go right, and vice versa. And then God and friends came along, community and healing came along, and all of a sudden there's an adjustment. Okay, now when I turn left, it's not quite as strong a right. It's I'm staying straight, so it's and just you're tweaking it. Maybe every day, every prayer, every healing, I was reading something recently, Nate, about that was so cool. A rabbi in the first, second century around Jesus' time, just right after Jesus' time, and it's random and it's not biblical and it doesn't really it's probably not even scientific, but I thought it was sweet. He said, every time you're in pain or wound and trauma, and somebody comes up to you and says, "I'm with you, I'm here for you," like you were for your friend who texted you. He said 1/60th of the suffering and the pain and the loneliness goes away. So he said you need 60 people in your life to just this one helped a little bit. This one, a friend of mine just recently passed away, and I shared that with his wife. It's just like people will say things to you, and some of them will actually take you the wrong direction. But the good ones, they're not trying to fix you. They're just, I'm here, I'm present. I agonize with you. It's just 1/60th of this turn, and that's. I say that to say, when your friend reached out to you, or when we do that, when we don't know how to ride the bike the right way, we don't know how to stand on our own, right? And I think that's why. Personally, I believe that's why God, though He could send the lightning bolt or have Benny Hinn knock on our door and say, "I'm here to heal you," He could do that, but He chooses this other route because, and I know you've heard this before. We were wounded in community or by people, and God has chosen to bring healing by people. So smart that He has done this. At first, I didn't like that, but now I see, okay, it's replacing the memory. So you didn't learn to ask or want. You meet Allie. She loves you and she's attached to you. And you're seeing, wait a minute, she wants. Okay, that's one thing, but it's somebody who's healthy and loving and loves me, and she wants. So maybe wanting is okay. So what's happening? She's actually bringing God's loving attachment and healing to you, almost repairing that old memory, that old life of I can't want, I can't expect, I can't. I have to shut my desires down, and now all of a sudden somebody, So it wasn't like God zapped you and you had desire and want all of a sudden. He put you in a community, one with your wife, and I'm sure others around you that started. But it has to be people that love you and trust you. And I don't know if you're Dr. Jim Wilder. He talks about people that when you turn and see them, you haven't seen, or they walk into the room and you see that they are joyful at seeing you. They want to be around you. That's an attachment. You attach to those people.
Absolutely.
And those people bring such healing to you of the course changes and helping you ride the bike or stand or walk. And something like that. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to ramble on there.
No. It's so true. We come into the world looking for somebody looking for us.
That's the exact statement. I read it in his book. Yeah. Thanks for joining us today. And if you hadn't watched, Nate was with us maybe 3 years ago, and told maybe a little bit more of your story, your personal story of the addictions and how you got out of it and how that did your marriage. So that's available at the Gary Wilkerson podcast. I think it's we'll put in the show notes exactly what episode it was so people can look that up. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Have a good day.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we invite you to do 2 things. First, share this with someone else. Second, click on the subscribe or follow button on whatever app you're using to listen to the show. That way you get notified when we release a new episode. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you next time.